Okay, hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. I'm James Peppe, and this is Pep Talks. Thanks for tuning in. It's been a little over 3 years now since Russia invaded a peaceful, sovereign neighboring country by the name of Ukraine. Over 3 years, and still there are far too many of us regular folks here in America who think that that's none of our business and has no effect on our everyday lives. We couldn't be more wrong. Couldn't be more wrong. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about that and why we need to begin to take another look at what's going on in Ukraine and what we can and should be doing to help defend that country and make the world a better place for all of us. Look, regular folks here in America, all of us, we should be just as concerned about peace and order all around the world as we are about peace and order in the streets of America. Let me say that again. We all have an interest that the world is a peaceful, orderly place, the same way we do that our cities and towns and communities are peaceful and orderly, because that's the world that we live in. If you think because extremists and the forces in the power establishment have conditioned you to think that things that go on halfway across the world don't affect your everyday life, it's a mistake. They do. The world is an ever shrinking place, and that's due to communications and technology and other factors. The United States has long since outgrown our own borders when it comes to interacting with the world. Our prosperity here in America depends on being able to do business with the world and for us to be able to travel the world, both to do business, but also for other reasons, pleasure, vacations, and other sorts of purposes. We need a world that is peaceful and orderly. And when countries, especially superpowers, go rogue and start to inflict war and terrorism, frankly, on smaller, weaker, more helpless nations around them for whatever their own ambitions or motives might be. In this case, it's a dictatorial thug leader in Vladimir Putin who has these illusions of grandeur of reestablishing an old Russian empire that goes back to the 1800s or even further back, and thinks that he can still operate in the world the way people back then did. That threatens that order and that peace around the world. And it threatens our ability to operate and to move about the world in the way that we'd like to, in the way that everybody, not just Americans, but everybody should be able to. Now, all of that is to say nothing about the principle of standing up for freedom and democracy. Now, I will tell you that I think it's a big mistake for those people who claim to adhere to the America First philosophy when they think that us helping a country like Ukraine in this situation is contrary to that idea. It's not. Again, for what I just told you, we have an interest in the world being peaceful, and we have an interest in making sure that a country like Russia can't terrorize its neighbors and others and perhaps grow its strength illegitimately in a way that might threaten us more directly later on. Initially, I wanted to go deeply into the analogies to pre-World War II and the ideas about history, or at least patterns of history repeating themselves. And it very much looks like that in terms of what's been going on in Ukraine, the way the United States has put its head in the sand in the name of America First, just like we did before World War II, the way in many respects, the Western Alliance, NATO, European countries have in too many ways tried to pacify or appease Putin the way the West did with Hitler. There are many, many parallels there that should not be lightly treated or overlooked. There are dangers there that history has taught us so many times over, the lessons of what can happen negatively when we ignore those things. But I don't think it's even necessary to do it in this case. The simple common sense view of this is that the world is a worse off place, is going to be far worse again going forward if we allow things like this to go unchallenged. Countries like Russia to invade neighbors like Ukraine and to murder, slaughter hundreds of thousands of people and try to steal a sovereign nation's country. It's obvious on its face. It's bad for the world, and therefore it's bad for us. And as a matter of principle, if nothing else, we have the power to stop it from happening, and we ought to stop it from happening. Now, President Trump has been very vocal in his first few months in office, and even before he took office, about wanting to stop this war. It's kind of interesting, really, and ironic. The president, during the campaign and in the transitional period before he took office in January, talked about ending this war on day one. And in case some of you on his side, his supporters, want to try to blow that off as he wasn't being literal, he wasn't being serious, there are recordings, videos over and over and over again where the president makes it very clear that he was being serious, that he believed that his very presence would promote an end to that war even before he took office. So don't try to do that. I mean, again, it's a bit of a digression on my part, but my point is this. President Trump has tried in a number of different ways, both before and since taking office, to try to end this war. And the irony is that he and his side talk about the war as if it makes no difference to us. It's not our business. We don't have an interest in it. We should stay out of it. And I don't understand, and maybe somebody can help me understand. Go ahead in the comments below if you can, help me understand how we can, at the very same time, have no interest in the war. It has nothing to do with us, none of our business, but at the same time want to end the war. If we want to end the war, and the president's very frustrated that Vladimir Putin has not responded positively to his overtures for ceasefire and all that. If we want to help end the war, if the president, when he talks about the bloodshed and the killing needs to stop and we need to end this war, why? If it's not in our interests, why? If we don't have a stake in it, why? If it doesn't matter to us, if it has nothing to do with America first, why? Well, clearly it does. Clearly the war itself is problematic for the United States, according to President Trump himself, or else he wouldn't care, right? Even if it's just, it's bad for all these people to be killing each other. Okay, all right, then let's stop the war. But we're not going to do it by begging. We're not going to do it by putting pressure on Ukraine to surrender their country, whether that's 20% of it today or all of it tomorrow. That is the wrong way. We can't keep expecting Putin to resolve this war without extreme pressure being applied to him and to Russia. He wants what he wants. He's getting it little by little. It's taking forever, but he sees a path forward where he can take all of Ukraine and eventually go further into Western Europe. We can't allow it just to keep going and gaining momentum the way it did for Hitler and Nazi Germany. We can't, because it just creates more problems for us down the road. And that should be plainly obvious for everybody. But again, I want to focus on this idea that it doesn't matter to us. If it didn't matter to us, President Trump wouldn't be making efforts to try to end the war the way he has been. If it didn't matter, he wouldn't, but it does matter. And that's where he betrays the truth about the whole thing. It does matter. And that's why he's been trying to negotiate an end to the war. But his approach is wrong. It's wrong because, again, it seeks to pacify and to appease Putin by giving him what he wants, control of 20% of Ukraine as it stands today, and promises that we'll do business with him, we'll take off all of the sanctions, and we'll legitimize everything he's done up until now. And let's just call it a day. Well, A, that's wrong on its face, and B, it's not enough for Putin, so it's not going to work. In the meantime, we're trying to tell the Ukrainians that they should just accept the fact that they can't win and that they have to give away part and maybe eventually all of their country. Well, that's a non-starter if you're in Ukraine. The same way it'd be a non-starter if it was our country. If the Japanese had invaded Pearl Harbor and people on the America First side said, give them Hawaii, just give it to them. It's better than having a war, right? So none of it makes any sense. The America First position with respect to the war in Ukraine ought to be for us to step up our support of Ukraine financially and militarily, because it's in our interest to do so, because it'll only get worse and it'll cost more later on. It should be to step up our support and to change the tone of our attitude towards Russia in such a way, both in word and in deed, to say, you know what, we're done. We tried, we gave you a chance to get out of this with actually some gains, even though that's sort of wrong, right? We gave you a chance to peacefully end this thing and you blew it. And you know what? We're not playing this game anymore. You're done. You're done. And we could load up Ukraine with all the weapons it needs. We could give them other kinds of support. We could tighten the screws on Russia even more than we already have economically around the world. And we could help end this thing on the side of right, which is the Ukrainian side. Let me point out another lesson of history that people seem to have conveniently overlooked in this whole thing. I read too many disturbing analysis pieces from so-called military experts that keep repeating the mantra, essentially, that Ukraine can't win, and that it's pointless to be fighting this, and that they should be willing to give away 20% of the country or more because they can't win. Because as President Trump has famously declared, they have no cards to play. You know, I haven't heard any of them reference, none of them, how on earth they believe that when a few decades ago, freedom fighters on horses and camels defeated the great Soviet Union in Afghanistan. 10 years. And the Soviet Union was, by all accounts, far more powerful than Russia is. In 10 years, the Soviets tried to control Afghanistan and were run out of there by guys on horseback and on camels with machine guns and shoulder-held rockets that took down their helicopters in Afghanistan. 10 years, and they couldn't win. And the Afghanis took their country back. By the way, pro tip here, if you haven't seen it, it's an old movie, but go watch Charlie Wilson's War. It's fascinating. It's great. Very entertaining. Certainly it's fictionalized in many respects, I'm sure. But the point is, the great Soviet Union couldn't take over a pile of rocks in Afghanistan and defeat a bunch of guys on horses and camels. But now we've got military experts and analysts who say that a much better equipped Ukrainian army, who has held off Russia for 3 years when those same experts didn't think they'd last 3 weeks, maybe even 3 days. Those experts think that Ukraine can't do the same thing that those Afghanis did and defend and reclaim their country. And that seems to me to be ridiculous. We need to have the same will we had in supporting those freedom fighters in Afghanistan with Ukrainians. Again, not just a peaceful sovereign nation, but a friend of ours, one of our allies. And that leads to this issue. You think that some of you might think that alliances are overblown. Who cares about stuff like that? We should care about ourselves. America first again, right? Well, we have allies and we build alliances to advance our own interests first. And our allies do the same thing. They engage with us in an alliance to advance their interests. So when we're allied with countries like Ukraine, from our point of view, it's in our interest. From their point of view, it's clearly in their interest. That's what alliances are. And these are our friends. These are peaceful, friendly people. Now, forget about all the garbage you hear in the media and the propaganda coming from every which side, about the Nazification of Ukraine and all this garbage and so forth. These are peaceful, free, sovereign people who have a right to live free and who we want to be able to live free because they're part of the bigger world that we want to be peaceful and orderly. So America can do business around the world without these kinds of dangers. It all ties together. And here's the last point. Maybe not the last, we'll see. But it's in our everyday interests. It affects our everyday lives. When the world is tumultuous like this, when there's stuff like this going on that doesn't have to be going on, it costs us money, right? And it'll cost us more in the long run if we don't resolve it sooner rather than later. And that affects money and resources we can apply to solve problems here closer to home, right? Now, again, that is not an argument for saying, let's get out of that altogether and start taking that money that we're giving Ukraine and put it to the problems here at home. I mean, That is a powerful argument. And I recognize that. And that's what the populists who support the president's position on all this, that's kind of what they're pointing to. But what people like me are pointing to is that that is short-sighted because it's going to cost us more in the long run if we do that. It will cost us more and it will pull us in more, maybe even to the point like World War II, where we have to use American troops. And now you start to compound the financial costs with the human costs and the bloodshed and the loss of life and all of that. Again, we're smart enough. We've seen the history. We know how it works. We should not let ourselves go down that path again, where we try to stay out. We try to stay out. We try to stay out. We don't want to get in. America first, yada, yada, yada. And then we can't help but be brought in because eventually it comes to us. It will. It will. So the long-term smart play is to resolve this situation now. And we can absolutely have the power to stop Russia dead in its tracks and to get them out of there. We absolutely have the power to do it. Again, history's on our side. Power is on our side. The right is on our side. You know, the whole expression, does might make right or right makes might? I believe that right makes might. Might doesn't make right. Right makes might. And we are a powerful nation who are on the right side when we defend our friends and allies like Ukraine from this kind of disorder in the world, from the rogue tyrants like Vladimir Putin. We have right on our side, and we ought to defend that because the world gets better when we do, and it gets worse when we don't. And we have a real America first interest in the world getting better in these ways. It's really as simple as that. So this is in the news every day, as you know. It caught my eye again this morning because of reports that Putin has increased his attacks across Ukraine, missiles, drones, etc., in the wake of some successful attacks by Ukraine on Russian Air Force bases. And what we get from Trump is crickets, nothing. In fact, there are reports that the president has removed a lot of the air defenses that we had put in place on Ukraine's behalf previously. He has quietly removed them, which has put Ukraine at even more risk, even more vulnerability to these attacks, these increasing attacks by Russia. And mind you, if you're still not convinced about the whole thing, understand this. Ukraine attacks Russian air bases, blows up a bunch of Russian bombers and aircraft that have been dropping bombs on Ukrainian cities, right? And how does Russia respond? By sending missiles and drones into apartment buildings and hospitals and civilian locations like that all around Ukraine. If you're not sure what's going on, understand this. Ukraine is defending itself, and there's nothing that it can do that is illegitimate in the defense of its country. When you are in the defensive position, anything you can do to repel the invaders is warranted and acceptable and legitimate. Russia's the invader. And what are they doing in response to Ukraine blowing up some of their airplanes in its own defense? What are they doing? They're attacking civilians. They're attacking civilian targets. They're not attacking Ukrainian air bases or drone making facilities. I'm sure they're trying to, and maybe they are in some cases, but they are attacking civilians in Ukraine to try to break the will of Ukrainians so that they will give up, surrender, and just hand over their country to Russia. That's what they're doing. It's flat out state-sponsored terrorism. It's all it is. And for the United States of America to turn our backs on a friend and an ally and free people, peaceful people who did nothing to warrant this invasion from Russia, it is outrageous and it's shameful for the greatest nation, the greatest peace-loving nation the world has ever seen, to turn its back on them. Now, I'm going to digress one more time here. If you are the propaganda that the president and his people, including his chief negotiator in this situation and his vice president and others, the propaganda that's coming straight out of Moscow, that Ukraine brought this on itself by trying to become a member of NATO, by getting tighter and closer with us and the West, that justified, that provoked Russia into this action, then you are falling for it. Don't. Just because they wanted to join our alliance, wanted to be closer with us for their own defense, because they've known all along that they are potential targets of Russia. They know the attitude that comes from the Kremlin, that comes from Putin and others, wanting to gobble up Ukraine. And they've wanted defense, and they've wanted the security of the NATO alliance and of the Western civilization, because not only that, but because they relate to it better. They're a free democratic country. And they want to be closer to other free democratic countries because they're strength in our numbers. It's only obvious. So I say that Ukraine is defending itself from an unprovoked, aggressive, criminal attack on the part of Vladimir Putin and Russia. And some of you might say, no, they brought this on themselves. Bullshit. They didn't. Give that up. Get over that. That is the wrong way to think. That is the wrong way to behave. And it is unworthy of the United States to have that mentality. Ukraine is a victim in this 100%. They did nothing to deserve this. And we need to stand by them, and we need to increase our support, not decrease it further. So this is what's in America's interest. This is America first. We all need to step back. If you've been on the other side, start to think about it in those terms. Think about it a little differently. And again, let's go about the business of raising our voices with our elected officials to let them know that we get it, that America's interest in a peaceful and orderly and prosperous world is what makes us the strongest here at home. What gives us the best chance for peace and prosperity here is that kind of world order. So let's raise our voices. Let's reach out to our members of Congress again and our elected officials and tell them that we've gone too long allowing this thing to go the way it's going. And we need to turn that around. We need to get back on the right side of this before it gets even worse and before we get sucked in 1 or 2 or 3 years further down the road. And it's even more costly in American lives and treasure at that point. So again, let's raise our voices. I want to hear what you have to say. So put your comments below. If you haven't done it already, no excuses. You got to subscribe to the show, like, and share with your friends and all your network lists. Again, let me know what you think. Let me know about your suggestions for future episodes. Let's get our country back where it needs to be, on the right side of history, on the right side of situations like this, because it's in our interest to do so, to promote a peaceful, prosperous, and orderly world that maximizes American freedom to operate in that world. That's what we want. That's what we need. That's America first. And we need to start getting back to that. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. In the meantime, thanks for checking us out today. And I'll talk to you again in the next Pep Talks real soon. Thanks, everybody.